Good morning. My name is Gregory Holtz. I'm an investigator for the Pittsburgh Regional Office, and I will be your moderator for this session. Can everyone hear me? Hello? There we go. That's much better. My name is Gregory Holtz. I'm an investigator from the Pittsburgh Regional Office, and I'll be your moderator today for this session. We are thrilled to have you here with us today, and we have a diverse and dynamic panel of professionals to discuss with us best practices to recruit and retain individuals with disability. Please welcome Tricia Zeltwecker and Mike Allison from Penn-Mar Human Services. Tricia is currently a career counselor. Tricia has been a committed member of the Penn-Mar Human Services team since 1991. Starting as a DSP, she eventually became their contract manager before transitioning to her current role as job developer in 2012. Her contributions to the organization are invaluable as she builds connections between Penn-Mar and the community through networking with employers. Tricia has her certification in Mark Gold and Associates, CESP, and ACRE, and she's a certified ACRE trainer. In 2014, she graduated from Leadership York and has since served as the president of York Business Networking Group. Tricia's active involvement in the community includes serving as an ambassador for York County Economic Alliance and being a member of the board of the Southern York County Business Associates. Her passion for helping employment seekers achieve their goal is evident in her successful placement of many individuals in community employment. Tricia also plays a vital role in training new hires at Penn-Mar on customized employment. Mike is a PA employment support manager. He began his career in human services in 2003 at the Residential Psychiatric Treatment Facility for Children and Young Adults after having worked in law enforcement. While there, he served as a mental health worker, shift leader, and night supervisor, and lastly, as residential supervisor. In addition to that, he was a JKMS Safe Crisis Management instructor and Red Cross First Aid and CPR instructor as well. He left work as a residential manager and program specialist with a few agencies specializing in individuals with intellectual disabilities. During this time, he receives his ODP certification, Certified Investigator certification, which he still holds today. After working in a residential day program, he transitioned to the role of incident manager, coordinator, and full-time investigator, where he managed any reportable instances and investigations for the agency. He is now the PA employment manager at Penn-Mar. He's been in this role since November of 2022, and he is still learning what it takes to support people that we served in the employment supported industry. Our next panelist is Kate Gillis Hanna. Charge it to my head and not my heart, if I mispronounce names. She is the CEO of Gil Hanna's Group and the founder of Nor Coffee Shop. Kate has spent her career transitioning particular needs of the account marketing and communication plans. Her expertise is issue management and grassroots marketing programs has helped shift perspective and inform the public of critical and complex issues, all while successfully building long-term advocacy relationships. Simply put, Kate is passionate about helping the most vulnerable and ensuring a message is delivered in a digestible manner. Her 20 years of strategic communications experience were earned a variety of roles in industries ranging from finance to state government to nonprofit agency work. Please help me welcome Amy Nuaves. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Perfect. She is the executive director for the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities in the City of Philadelphia. Amy's office oversees the Mayor's Commissions on People with Disabilities, the Office of ADA Compliance and Constitute Services. Together, these offices work to make Philadelphia a better place for people with disabilities. As a neurodivergent with deafness, and as a person in addiction recovery, Amy has built her career as a statewide and national recognized advocate for the forefront of supporting families as a facilitator, keynote speaker, published author, and community leader. Additionally, Amy is the governor-appointed council member of the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council and statewide Independent Living Council. She completed her undergraduate at York College of PA in 2002, and obtained her master's in human relations, diversity, equity, and strategic planning at the Impact of University of Oklahoma in 2022. Please help me welcome Dale Vernick. Dale's an advocate and protection advocate for the Beneficiary Social Security Coordinator for the Disability Rights Pennsylvania. Dale has been an advocate at Disability Rights Pennsylvania since 2008, working for the rights of people with disabilities in various manners. Prior to her life as an advocate, she was an elementary school teacher accredited through the American Montessori Society. A first-generation immigrant, she understands life as a refugee and the effects of war, having lived through the Persian Gulf War of 1990. Dale is a parent of a child with a disability. She presently serves on the board of Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation and is a commissioner of the Pennsylvania Employment's First Oversight Board. She has her master's degree focused on legal studies and public policy. Thank you, panelists, for being here with us today. And so even though I read your bio, I want to hear it from you. Could you tell us a little bit more about your organization?
Is this work? Yeah, we're good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Gillis-Hanna. I am the founder of Noor Coffee Shop in Camp Hill. Has anyone ever heard of Noor? Few people. Noor means the light in Arabic. And our tagline at the coffee shop is where everyone's light shines brighter. My daughter's name is also Noor. She is a 2-year-old little ray of sunshine who happens to have Down syndrome as well, which was the inspiration for us starting this coffee shop where we employ people of all abilities in a competitive integrated employment model. And so I encourage you to come over and check out our coffee shop. We would love to see you there. And in my day job, I also run a transitional housing program in Harrisburg called Brethren Housing Association. So you can always help there too.
I'm Dale Vernick, and I am an advocate, and I also direct the grant at Disability Rights Pennsylvania. The grant that I direct is called PABS, and that is Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security. And if you're not familiar with this Disability Rights Pennsylvania, we are the federally mandated organization for the state of Pennsylvania to be a protection and advocacy group. So we're basically here to help folks who who want to understand their rights to access, to inclusion, and particularly my role is to help folks overcome barriers to employment, to help students in transition. Very similar to Noor, my daughter is Lucy, which also means light. She is a 4-year-old. She was born with a significant physical disability and uses a prosthetic. So I do understand as a mom of a child with a disability that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to help folks understand how to really facilitate access, and that is something that I am learning every single day. So thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Trish Zellwanger, and I am with Penmar Human Services, and I am their career counselor, job developer. We actually support right around 600 individuals with trying to find their ability to live their best life through their residential settings, their vocational settings, and where I come into play to all of that is through their employment. That's how I help support. We tried to put them through what we call an exploration and discovery process, and we learn about all of their great skills and their attributes and their desires and their wants to be employed in our community. And then I search that out to businesses and find out where their businesses have those needs to be able to customize opportunities for the people that we support. And I'm gratefully be able to marry those two up and make that great connection. So yeah, that's me.
I'm gonna try this one.
Okay, go ahead.
So my name is Mike Allison. I'm the PA Employment Support Manager, or as Trish hates to hear me say, I'm her boss. My job is to oversee the employment program for Penmar in the Pennsylvania side of things. So I have some counselors like Trish. We have some job coordinators or coaches, and then we also have transportation that I oversee. Currently, we have about 82 people that I kind of manage to make sure they get to where they need to be, and that they're getting they're seeing the fundings, the units that they need are in their ISPs. We currently work with OVR and the county, so we take care of the funding through those sources. Trish is doing a terrific job. She keeps me busy. We keep adding people. We had like 50 some people, and like we're rapidly approaching. She likes to add 5 or 6 people every 2 months or so for me. So it's a busy thing, but it's a good thing to have. It's great to get people out and working.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Nieves. A visual introduction of myself. I'm a fair-skinned female. My hair is slicked back, with black glasses, and a floral dress on. I'm the executive director for the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. And in that role, we also support the Mayor's Commission on People with Disabilities. The Mayor's Commission on People with Disabilities is one of our oldest commissions. It started in 1987. However, the office wasn't enacted until this current administration to fully support that work. And so the Kenny administration was the first to ever evaluate the Philadelphia's compliance with the ADA. So we were 30 years late. That plan did not start until 2020. I was hired in 2021. So I inherited the first ever evaluation plan, and it's my responsibility to help the city over the next 5 years to address those corrective actions, work on our cultural shifts around disability inclusion, dismantling ableism, and working with our colleagues, departments, and city council as well. One of the things that I'm very proud to say is if you are a Philadelphia voter, you will see a ballot question this election asking if we should make this office a permanent office in our city structure. It's only elected by executive order. It's a project of the mayor, which means it can go away by a future mayor. And so we want to make sure that this work lives on. And so if you are a Philadelphia voter, I can't tell you how to vote, but for your awareness, there is a question related to making this work permanent and also removing harmful language in the city's charter. People with disabilities are only referred to as handicapped in the city's charter. And so this legislation would also remove that harmful language. So I received special education in my K through 12 education. And I have 3 children with developmental disabilities and 1 with medical complexities. So I live this work every day. And my research and my PhD currently is on employment practices around people with disabilities, that disability and capacity coexist. So I love what I do, but that means I work very hard, as I think everyone does. When you love what you do, that saying of you'll never work a day in your life, you work harder than anyone else because you love what you do. And I do.
Even before we get fully started, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do. And it's super important that you're here. We want to really hear about the information that you all have. So starting with Amy, let's talk about implementation. So what has your organization done and what programs have been implemented to really help recruiting, retaining, and helping individuals with disability? We'll just go down the line.
Sure. So we started the ADA Liaison Program. And that is a partnership with our city departments. We have a workforce of approaching 30,000 members, which means I can't possibly as an individual or as a small office meet the needs of all 30,000 of our colleagues at one time. And so we started this peer-to-peer program where we have 70 employees that have volunteered in addition to their regular roles at the city to receive additional training on the ADA, employment practices, knowing where the resources are, connecting with our Philadelphia Human Relations Commission, working with our HR department, as well as we have an employee relations unit that helps address any grievances and things like that. So those 70 colleagues really help amplify our capacity to be in every department at one time. And I think that's one of the programs that's helped us be more successful We're able to respond quicker when there is, and I will say, I think a lot of times in the workplace, when there is a conflict related to disability or accessibility in the workplace, it comes down to communication issues of people like thinking what is the limit or what they can and cannot do. And really a conversation can eliminate that barrier before it continues to snowball. So we really rely on those liaisons to help us do that. And I think too, I know for myself, I hid my deafness from my employers for many years, which isn't a great plan because I couldn't hear what was happening around me. But I didn't want anyone to think of me as less than. And because of my cognitive differences, always tried to mirror my colleagues and hide the fact that I was disabled and a member of the deaf community. And now I'm very proud of that. I talk about it that I'm out at work as a disabled employee so that other people know that. Part of the liaison program is that it doesn't always feel safe to ask your HR manager of how to get an accommodation or that you're having a conflict with a colleague. And so we meant to do this as a peer-to-peer relationship program. So I could just be like, hey, Mike, do you know where I can get that form? Because I really don't want to ask Janet. Right. So it really helps like eliminate some of that, and it helps to normalize and take out some of the trauma and the stress of understanding that you have a right to have what you need to do your job. And we will all do better if we have what we need. So that's a program that I think has been the most impactful for the city. But also we recently had a policy change. If you applied to the city as a civil service role, you had the right to request accommodations for the exam. But when we look at our non-civil service jobs, there was nothing that was required, and every department would post their postings, but they wouldn't always include who to contact or what your rights were. You had those rights, we just weren't sharing that. So now it's required of anyone posting a non-exempt job, they must include how people can receive accommodations, who do they contact, what does that look like, whether that's in completing the application, the interview process, onboarding, and that's had a huge shift in making sure that people have what they need from the get-go of the hiring. So those are two things I'd like to highlight.
Okay, so some of the practices that we put into place to help support with helping people find employment is we actually go through what we call ACRE. It's a based learning system that takes about 6 to 8 weeks to learn the process, where we identify an individual who wants employment, and we put them into into the community, trying to assess some of their skills. If someone says they want to, hypothetically, let's just put it out there, work on a horse farm, I will partner in the community with a horse farm and actually expose them to that opportunity, show them what it really looks like, and then they can make that decision, accordingly as they go through. But the process is really to identify their skills and then apply that there. We're also, the Mark Gold process is very similar to that. So we've been certified to do that. And we, as an organization, I just became nationally certified to be able to teach the ACRE program. So I'm able to help and partner with local organizations like Penmar to help teach their staff how to follow the process to be able to have great outcomes for the people that we support. Can't think of anything else.
No, I think the big thing that we do, as far as Trish is talking about the development process, is exposing people to new things. Like a lot of times we have people come to us and say, I want to get a job and I want to do this, or I want to do this. But part of the process, which is a really great part of the process, is we expose them to things that aren't on their list, to give them an opportunity to see if they can do something. And when they have the opportunity to do that and they excel at it, it really helps them get that sense of pride, and it exposes them to something they didn't even know was possible. We recently employed 2 individuals that for the county of York. One's doing janitorial stuff, but another one is working in the voter registration department. He's scanning in voter registration things because they still have stuff on paper that was supposed to be updated a long time ago. He's responsible for that, but he wasn't necessarily looking for that job, but Trish was able to get him a job assessment or an opportunity to try it out, and it was instantly click. So it's a great thing to be able to give people opportunities that they didn't even realize they were capable of, or that even were available to them.
Right, exactly. I was just going to say that too, is that, through our organization and the process that we have, a lot of the individuals, if they don't ever, come to us, they probably would never have an opportunity to independently go out and find that good match for them. So having them referred to us and bringing them on board and getting to know them and then assessing all their great skills. And then again, I try to marry that up with, opportunity in the community through employment, with making those relationships and creating those opportunities. And it's been a fabulous, I'm overwhelmed with the success of the customization side of it for the people that we support. Actually, unfortunately, because of COVID, more businesses are open to that customization, which is great. So we've had, like Mike said, had some really great success stories in the past couple of years. So yeah.
So at Disability Rights Net Pennsylvania, we, it's kind of it works a little differently because we don't provide any direct employment services. But I'm so glad to hear all of this, because now I'm going to send them all people who call us right down here, right? So, and people generally will call us as a last resort. When people are really struggling, understanding how to get through a certain issue that they're experiencing at employment or in school or accessing services or what have you. So it's in terms of employment, the typical question that we get is, how am I going to get through HR, or how am I going to get through? So we haven't really, as it relates to the question, haven't really implemented policy or things like that. But our role really is to help that person understand their rights. And, and sometimes we help them through that interactive process. And if that's not working, then, we get a little more involved. We have attorneys and advocates who work together. So sometimes it's necessary that we send a strongly worded letter saying, hey, this is what the law says, listen, right, and act. And what we do, our advocates and our attorneys are all involved in some other collaboration, like, for example, here, working with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I also sit on the Employment Oversight Commission, Employment First Oversight Commission. So I hear a lot of things. And what we like to work on is systemic. So if we see an issue that is affecting a great number of folks with disabilities, we want to work to try and remove that barrier, right? We want to bring change. So in that sense, we like to hear things. We like people to call us. We have an intake system. So our phones are constantly going. People are constantly calling us, sometimes not necessarily asking us for disability related services. Sometimes it's like, completely something different, right? But we still answer them and we still give them information, because ultimately it's about giving that person hope, hope that there is something that can be done to bring about change and access. So that's my spiel on our work.
We all have such different roles in this giant continuum here. As a small business employer, for me, recruitment was the easy piece. I think everyone in this room can see the need for employers to hire individuals with intellectual disabilities, which is what our real focus was on. And so recruitment wasn't difficult. We did create a partnership with the Capital Area Intermediate Unit to create a pipeline for high school students to get paid internships while they were still in their school districts. And so we were able to have 5 paid interns throughout the school year as well, which is creating that employment pipeline, not just for NOR, but for other employers in the community once they've built up that work experience. And so from a hiring perspective, we did do things a little bit differently than maybe a traditional coffee shop would do. We have a really abbreviated job application. It says, tell me about yourself. And so we just have a quick little paragraph blurb that people can submit, and then we meet in person. And we talk with the individual, we talk with their caregivers, we talk with their support staff, whomever it is, and we talk about where they are and what they're able to accomplish and what their hopes are and what if they would even like to work at a coffee shop. And so we meet them where they are, and a lot of the roles are developed that way as well. And then as far as retaining our staff, we've only lost one employee so far, and it's because she moved to go to a 4-year college that's focused on an autism program in Louisiana. And she has dreams of opening a NOR in Louisiana. She's working through creating her business plan for that. And so retaining staff has not been a challenge either. We are flexible. And we were talking at our table before we walked up here in employers are complaining a lot about lack of staffing, about having vacancies, and it's so much easier to make adjustments and accommodations for a person that's able to do the job than to be inflexible and have a vacancy. So for example, I had a gentleman, this was his first job. He's 38 years old and he is busing at NOR, and he would get very overwhelmed when we would have large crowds, and he started calling off work. And so I talked to Justin, I said, where are your challenges? What's keeping you from coming into work? And it was the crowds. He was getting overwhelmed. And so we adjusted his shifts. And that simple adjustment let us retain staff. We also permit breaks throughout the day. I mean, it's challenging to stand on your feet for anyone for 4 hours, let alone if you have low muscle tone or you have challenges with your physical abilities. So we say, tap in, like, I gotta sit down for 15 minutes. Can you guys help me out? So everyone's always supporting each other. And that doesn't just go for our individuals with different abilities. We have in typically developing individuals, I don't even like to use that terminology. I'm not sure what's appropriate, that need to call off for different reasons as well. And so we try to be very flexible with what we're doing to support people in their real lives.
Thank you. And kind of going along with what you said, this question goes to you, Kate, and Trisha. So let's talk about accommodations. What is the most frequently requested accommodation? And then what's the cost behind that? We'll start with you, Kate.
I think the breaks that I just mentioned, we do have abbreviated shifts for some of our staff. I have a young man with Down syndrome who's recovering from cancer, and his ability to work for our traditional 3 or 4 hour shift was just not possible for him. And so we were able to put him in 2 hour shift increments, which was an accommodation that we made that worked for everybody. And we are wheelchair accessible in both of our entrances, which was important, and as well as having 2 ADA compliant restrooms. Traditionally, for a small shop, you don't need to have 2 restrooms, but I wanted to ensure that we always had accessibility for everybody to access that as well. I haven't had too many other accommodation needs, but maybe someone else can speak to that.
I can go. So where we normally seem to have to do accommodations would be in obviously the hours. Because maybe somebody really is already enthralled into their life already and only has a few hours a week to spare to work, right? But it's important for them to work and they want to work. So we try to accommodate those hours inside of a business that makes sense. The other part is more of that technology. We probably accommodate that part too. As we all know, everything is going into that technology and swiping cards and putting in your key code and things like that. And if there's somebody that just does not want or have that ability to do that, then we would have to come up with an alternative solution. And a lot of times that's asking a supervisor to, punch them in, punch them out. And that is, for me, that's really not a cost. There's not a cost to that. That should be just a given. That's a support of a staff person or support of their manager. So yeah, it is. There isn't a lot out there that costs that I can think of at the moment that has a cost effect to it. But the technology part is kind of the tough one.
Which is perfect because that's my next question. I'll kind of open it up to all of you. So how does technology really play a part in the hiring process? And do you have any examples how technologies may assist employees to their day-to-day duties? I saw Dale.
From a technological perspective, we have our point of sale system, which is the register. One of my employees and on day one was able to use the system that we use for our menu. We use pictures as well as text under each of the items to help them locate each item as they're checking folks out. We also had a young woman who was nonverbal with Down syndrome and autism who had an assistive technology device with her so that she could communicate with us using that technology. And she thrived at our shop and hopefully will be coming back in the fall. She was one of our summer interns. But the technology that's out there right now that can enable and empower people to hold roles that maybe they couldn't have held years ago is just bringing us even closer to ensuring that folks are integrated our workforce more effectively.
I had to open my laptop because I have a ton of things that and I'm just gonna, just very briefly tell you about, according, for your question, Greg, someone, for example, and I asked some of my coworkers to help me out here with this question because, it depends really on the person's disability and what they need. So it really is very crucial to ask them, right? Like, what do you need? What do you think you could use to be successful in this particular task? Some of the examples that I was able to garner from my coworkers is for a person with a cognitive impairment, as a result maybe of a TBI, like a traumatic brain injury, may need technology such as like alarms, to kind of remind them, to provide them those extra reminders because, the traumatic brain injury has somehow adversely affected their memory or how they process that information. Accessible desks, adjustable desks, and some of those things, some of those items are not expensive really if you look at it in the grand scheme of your business, right? Some of those things are very affordable, and as simple as that, chair lounges for somebody with a back issue, somebody who needs, sign language interpreting or deaf software program, somebody who has limited dexterity, to have, a different kind of a keyboard. Technology, as we keep getting better in technology, things are not as expensive as they used to be. So it's really a matter of trying to research and have HR folks understand that, it is really asking that person, what they need to be successful.
Sure. So as we had to navigate through COVID, with a lot of businesses like closing their doors, not allowing outsiders in, even though people were employed that we supported were still employed, we had to use that technology side of things, which was really great. So we were able to, text message, call, check in, make sure things were running smoothly that way, which actually continues to transition to, outside of COVID. And I support a young lady who has short-term disability. Literally, one day she will not remember the next. So in order for her to be successful inside of her business, or her work, was that I videotaped her whole day. I videotaped how to get into the building, how to punch in, and walked through on her phone and walked her through the whole way in. Now, eventually, over time, it took about 2 months of her doing that. Now she's able to not utilize getting in, but it took her, that's what it takes to get to that point. So using that type of technology made her continue her employment, or get employed. So that was part of an accommodation, a little bit of an accommodation that I had to use because some of the equipment and things were proprietary. So I had to kind of sign off and say, we won't, use it against them. But that was pretty much a great accommodation for that young lady.
Yeah, and just to piggyback what Trish was saying, we're actually about ready to take on a new case. It's a very interesting young lady. She comprehends English, but she doesn't speak English. She speaks Portuguese. And I couldn't convince any of my staff to take a crash course in Portuguese. So we're looking, and part of her job plan or her job development is going to be exploring different communication and translation programs and devices. So that way we can give her that opportunity. She's been employed in the past, but they haven't worked out due to her becoming frustrated because she wasn't able to explain to the employer challenges she was having or that sort of thing. So a big part of that beginning of that is going to be trying to find something that she can communicate effectively with her job coach and with Trish, and then also in the future in her employer. So we have, as an agency, as an organization, we actually have a tech library that's available to us that has all kinds of adaptive things that the houses are able to go into and they can rent out to try. And if it finds out that they work, then they're able to purchase them for the houses. And we're really working towards that. So this is going to be our really first big push into that. So we're looking forward to that challenge.
I think one of the things when it comes to accommodations that people just don't understand is it's not so much about the individual. I know that sounds wrong, right? But I'll give this example. When I was hired by the city, my ADA accommodation request was for captioning. The city heavily relies on Microsoft Teams for all of our meetings, as do many government entities. And even though we could see the icon there, they would never turn on. And so through my one accommodations request for me as a single employee in 30,000 people, we found out that Microsoft doesn't automatically enable it on government contracts. You have to specifically ask for it at the contracting level. And so not only did it change our contract with Microsoft, but it shifted a conversation at Microsoft about why are you doing this for education contracts and not government contracts? It should be enabled for all contracts with Microsoft. So, and I kept thinking to myself, I can't be the only one that has needed this. At that time, we'd been in the pandemic a year. And so we did a campaign of just click the 3 dots. So people knew that they could have a more equitable meeting if they just click the 3 dots on their panel and enable the captions. And this is great for people whose first language is in English. This is great for all of you that are checking your emails right now. I know you're doing it. You're multitasking. So if you have like checked out because your boss sent you something, you can look up here and you just hop back up to the meeting. So it's a universal designed accommodation that costs $0, that met my needs as the employee that drove it, but it opened up the opportunity for everyone around me and a change globally of how contracts are done around captioning with Microsoft. So I want you to think about that yes, is it about meeting the needs of this one person? Absolutely. But the change that can happen in your organization can be profound when we do that. And 95% of accommodations, according to the Department of Labor, cost $0 to less than $500, okay, as a one-time cost. So, and yet the benefit is that we're retaining staff. People with disabilities are 7 times more likely to stay with an employer than a non-disabled employee. So that reduces your onboarding costs, that reduces your training, it reduces the gaps in hiring. And so it's an investment in your bottom line. And I think that the other thing is we have to stop thinking about that the traditional way of applying for jobs. Allow people to submit an ASL video of their resume. Why are we taking just a plain old Word cover letter and a resume and thinking that that's what we're looking for as professional, that that's the pedigree that we want in our organization? I mean, most of you Googled how to write a cover letter, okay? I know you did. So it's, to me, it's pretty meaningless, especially with ChatGPT, right? Like with those types of things. What I would rather see is someone's PowerPoint about their story and their journey and what skill sets they do and demonstrating what their capacities are. And so let's shift about how people traditionally come in our doors and what that looks like to support them. We do have employees that use screen readers. We have folks that use a variety of technology. But don't forget about low technology. We have one commissioner that to engage in online meetings uses a wooden spoon with the fat part of the spoon in her mouth, and she uses the skinny part to toggle her keyboard. That's low technology. And yet she is able to do that. So when you're doing a program or you're doing a digital program, make sure that it also is keyboard enabled, because you never know what people are going to be using to engage with you. Diversify how people can give their public comment to you. Why do they have to come to a hearing to do that? How can they submit it in oral form, in video form? We take comments all the time or input over the phone. We'll sit down with folks. When we've taken applications for our commission, you can send in a video. You can apply however in the way it works for you. And it has diversified the representation, and it has paid off exponentially for us to invest in low-cost accommodations and universal practices that benefit everyone. And I think the last thing I would say on accommodations is, how many of you like to know what a meeting is about before you get there?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to know the agenda, you want to know what's going on. If you're going to something like this, you want to know what the program is. Traditionally, in especially the corporate world, we see that as an ADA accommodation, right? To receive information ahead of time. No, it benefits the productivity of the space for everyone to have the information ahead of time. And to check your documents, make sure you're not sending, I call them illegal slide decks, and I will call departments out. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, unfortunately, your slide deck is illegal and cannot go out for your meeting until you fix these problems, because it is illegal for you to send out a slide deck for your meeting or your event, and you have not done an accessibility check and it has failed compliance with the ADA and Act 504. So it is illegal for you to do that. So stop doing that. So stop doing illegal slide decks, guys, as an accommodation, but that's a universal practice that you can do that benefits everyone, not just the people with disabilities in your space.
And y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard from all five of you is that it's not necessarily the cost, it's the effort. It's making the effort to accommodate a valuable employee, not the cost, it's the effort. And so going on to keeping the kind of the flow of the conversation, Amy, and this for Amy and Kate, have you seen incidents of disabled employees being treated adversely? And can you also talk about like maybe microaggressions that can happen in the workplace towards individuals with disability?
Absolutely. And I don't want to share too much about people's individual stories, because that's their story and their journey, but we absolutely see that. And we saw a trend last year where more and more employees were coming to our office for support with grievances. 95% of them had to deal with a supervisor attitude towards them. And, you know, we are charged with Title II compliance with the ADA, which is access to government programs, services, and goods. Technically, if you work for the government, your employee issues could also fall into that, but that's really Title I.
Glad to hear
So
it.
we're always
No.
instructed to help
Hey.
them get back on that pathway to have that
Something we can
addressed
get
with
for
our
free.
Human Relations Commission, our EEOC commissions, our
we've got
employee
nickel and
relations,
dime
and
on
those
nothing.
traditional
That's
things.
the Microsoft.
However, we were finding that there were still gaps in that process. And so we worked with our
Awesome.
Office of Diversity,
Glad.
Equity, and Inclusion. We worked with our HR and our employee relations group to say, okay, we're seeing this increase of employees that are circumventing those pathways to have more of that peer-to-peer support, because they don't feel heard if they don't bring me in. And we actually helped to advocate for an ombudsman for the workforce of the city of Philadelphia. And we recently hired an ombudsperson to help us with that, so that it was taking it out of the HR space, and so that people really felt represented and protected to have these grievances addressed. I'll share some of my microaggressions. I sound like a hearing person, as you can tell. That's because my hearing was lost as an adult. So all the time for me, the microaggressions happen of, oh, I didn't realize you were deaf. You sound so intelligent. Right? You're so articulate. I didn't know that you were deaf. That's so good for you, Amy. And I like, right? I have like a visceral, like I break out in hives to those things. And I recognize that I am a white woman in executive leadership for one of the largest US cities in our country. And I face that almost on a daily, if not weekly basis from my colleagues and community members that think it's so incredible that I, as a disabled person, am in a level of high leadership, and that I'm working on PhD level research as a disabled researcher. And so like, if that's happening to me at this level, let me tell you something. It's happening at Parks and Recs. It's happening in our streets departments. It's happening every single day to every level of employee, particularly of our employees of color as well. And so I just want to challenge you is like, think about that. It's not so sweet and benevolent of you to employ disabled people. One, it's federally mandated that you do so. And two, it benefits your entire workforce because we're the creators, we're the innovators, and we're the thought-provoking people that are going to look at things because guess what? We've had to face barriers our entire life. So when you're facing a crisis in your entity of where you're working, disabled folks are going to be able to help find the solution a lot faster because we have to do that every single day to get what we need for an everyday life. So I think that language is a big barrier for us with microaggressions. People just don't presume competence. And I think they're still stuck in this idea that it's so sweet that we would employ disabled people rather than seeing them as our equals and our colleagues and the people that we could actually learn more from and change the outcomes for our businesses by employing them.
Amy? I'm sorry. Kate.
I'm Amy.
No problem. I mean, I can't even top that. I mean, that's perfect. She summarized everything so beautifully. I think just from my perspective as a small business owner, because I lead that we are a for-profit coffee shop that employs people of all abilities, people come into the shop understanding a little bit more of what the environment is, but never, I mean, we have the best customer service, the best cup of coffee, the best baked goods you're going to get. And so I've been fortunate in the sense that I haven't witnessed those microaggressions from a work perspective. Now, as a mother of a child with Down syndrome, my daughter's like physical appearance may not be as people ask, are you sure she has Down syndrome? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's not like a spectrum of Down syndrome-ness. And so I hear what Amy's saying in the sense like, wow, thank God, like good for her. I mean, she's going to have like a really great life. I'm like, you guys are nuts. But yes, so from a work perspective, I echo everything she says. I've been very fortunate at NOR that we have not had that experience yet. I know it's inevitable, but yeah.
That's wonderful. So at this point in time, I want to open it up for questions from the audience. If you have a question for any of our panelists, now would be the time. I'll come to you if you just want to raise your hand. If not, I have my own questions I can continue to ask. Anybody?
I have a question online.
Well, I need you to use the mic so I can hear you in the caption.
And I finally enforced hearing aids far too late. Got past the teenage years and then said, no, you're going to college. You got to be able to hear what's going on. So I understand that. Question for any of you. Do you work with Pennsylvania's Office of Vocational Rehab or collaborate? And if so, in what way?
That's actually the beginning of our process. So what happens is that we have a job seeker. They usually go through OVR initially, and then they go through the assessment and evaluation process. They'll get their initial employment. And then once that process, it's a short-term process. It's usually about, is it 6 months, 8 months? It's about 6 to 8 month period. And then once that comes to an end, their funding with OVR ends. And then they usually, with our people, they'll transition to MHIDD services. And that's who funds our work through that. So they're basically the gateway. Now there are individuals that come to us that have an OVR denial letter, whether they were through the process previously or for whatever reason OVR can't support them, then hopefully we're able to establish that MHIDD and get the funding that way to support them in what they need.
So I will say, like at the city, we have a great partnership with our local office, but I also have great relationships because I do sit on the statewide Independent Living Council, which has a direct partnership with OVR. So that relationship really pours over into how we work with them in Philadelphia. We work with our community partners. And it's great to build those relationships because there are folks that fall through the cracks or get a denial or get swept up in the system. So it's important to have allies and things of that nature. to help advocate. And actually, I'll give an example. We had one of our interns last year. She was denied supports from OVR, and we were able to call a meeting and talk about it and figure out it was like an administrative mistake. And she shouldn't have been denied, but because she worked in our office, we were able to help her with that. So I have a standing meeting with OVR and our school district, even though I don't have any oversight of the school district, but we really want to make sure that disabled students have a pathway towards employment in our city. So that is one way that we work with OVR as well.
And yeah, at Disability Rights Pennsylvania, we do work closely with OVR. We sit on several of their meetings, like the Rehab Council meeting. We have a presence there. At the state board meetings, we have a presence there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes people, when they call us because they have a problem, right? And we like to speak with OVR leadership to kind of tell them or inform them about what kinds of issues their customers are facing, so that we can work together and maybe even support them in whatever way they need our support, and to kind of educate and even brainstorm ideas of how we can best have folks access their services efficiently.
I'm trying to.
And yes, we
trying to
also
watch-
work with
I've been
OVR.
trying the whole way
Pat
down
Keen
here,
is an
my computer
employee
on the
at
front seat.
OVR
I don't
locally
have to
here,
see it
and he's
listening
been
to
a
the
hero for
disability
me.
conference.
As a
I've been
small
like,
business
oh.
owner, you don't necessarily
You guys
know
like-
the services that
I
are
was,
available
like,
to you and supports
debating
that are
on going up
available
there
to you.
for it or listening. You could do
And I
either
think it's really
online or up there.
critical that the word
And
gets
then this
out
came
to
up
other
because
small
this
businesses that
the,
these supports
HRC
are in
doing it?
place. We're an
yeah.
OTJ.
So
I think I'm
I
saying
was
that
like,
right. Yeah,
was
we're an
like,
OTJ
how do I
approved
do this?
vendor
So I said,
now,
"Hold on, I'm
that
gonna
we're
come
able
down
to
and
help
have an
provide the
interview." Because
additional
this started
supports
at
and
9,
training
and so I'm gonna come
to
down
some
early.
of
I said,
our
"Is there a place that I
employees.
can
But
just,
yes,
like, crash
OVR has
in?
been a
No, I'm not
wonderful
gonna be in
resource
anybody's
for
way."
us as well.
And then my son got sick, so it started our morning off. So I'm listening to it in the
Hi,
car
my
on the
name
way
is
down.
Todd Schwartz. I'm from the Philadelphia office of PHRC. This message is primarily for Amy. Amy, as you know, Philadelphia is an old city with a very challenging infrastructure. How do you, how do you address the budgetary issues when you're making old facilities ADA compliant? And what do you tell private citizens who are dealing with that challenge?
Like rebuild with streets, with city council. We have regular meetings with that. And my director of ADA compliance is an architect by trade and has 20 years experience as a city planner for New York City. So even though there's only 2 of us charged with this plan, we have made phenomenal progress even in a pandemic. And we are on track to complete most of the corrective actions that have been identified in the plan. But one of the gaps we saw was that if a project required a permit and concrete, it was a lot easier for us to allocate and find funding for. There's actually more grant opportunities, there's more opportunity for partnership, and especially in our capital budgeting process with rebuild, we could really put it under the redesign and needs of the infrastructure of the city. The problem was adjusting a door speed in a restroom, right? Signage at the wrong height. The toilet paper dispenser right at the entrance of the door, right? We even had some signs where the braille was printed on paper behind plexiglass. Okay, So these are the types of things that I have inherited. And so what we did was we actually applied for a grant last year, $300,000 grant we were awarded to address the low cost, no cost corrective actions of the plan because departments were really struggling. We have a laborized union, we have unionized labor. And so in order for someone to adjust that door speed at the city of Philadelphia requires a supervisor and 2 employees for safety. That's about a $750 cost for one screw to be turned this way, okay? So what we were able to do is I was able to successfully advocate that ADA compliance work is specialized labor work. And so I was told over and over again, you will never get an exemption from the unions. The unions will never go for this. They will never allow you to do this work. And I was successful in getting that grant and the support of our labor unions and our Department of Labor to sign off on it, to even get the grant. And so we did a reevaluation of every rec center, every library, and city hall in 1 year. And so because the plan had said door speed city hall. Okay, well, have you ever been to City Hall in Philadelphia? It's a city block, guys, and 7 stories. So there's over 1,000 doors, by the way, in that building. So to just tell me that there's a door speed problem doesn't really help me. So we took the vendor and our capitated specialist with us with his screwdriver, and we evaluated the buildings and we took care of everything that was no cost on the spot while we evaluated it, so that there was immediate change. So it wasn't going in a report for someone later to come back to do it. And so we were actually able to put 600 fully accessible tactile signage in City Hall with that project. They're at the right height. The braille is not behind plexiglass. And we have just phenomenally met that need for all departments to not have to worry about those punch list items that make access more readily. You're right. We're one of the oldest cities. We turned 250 in like 2 more years, right? So and people love those dang cobblestones in Philadelphia. When residents come to us, it can be really challenging because we can share what we're doing, but it's never going to be enough in the moment to alleviate the problems that we have in access in the city. But one of the things that we do is we hold a public meeting every single quarter. We leave a half an hour for public engagement. I protect it like my life. I don't care if the mayor's on. I don't care if any of you are presenting. I cut you off when it's time for the public to speak. And so we receive that feedback. We've engaged them. They're part of the plan and we do nothing about it without them. And so we really make sure that we're informing where we need to go. And as we gear up to do the next evaluation, there will be people with disabilities leading the way, myself, others, and the community with us so that we can learn from those mistakes. It was the first time we ever did it. So there's always going to be lessons learned. I do believe that we will make this city accessible. We have a great partnership with the U.S. Access Board. We hosted them last year. We have a wonderful relationship with them. They've helped us. And lastly, I'll just share that last year, I felt that part of the problem was people didn't feel the sense of urgency because they didn't understand the disability representation of our city. Philadelphia has the highest demographics of people with disabilities of all large US cities. We are also the poorest largest US city. And so I really felt that people didn't understand that. So we actually launched the nation's only GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems. It's a geographical map of the Philadelphia area where we, for the first time in the nation, have taken race, ethnicity, age, and disability and put it all together so that you can see in the neighborhood level of how many people with disabilities live there, how many people with hearing, vision, cognitive, accessibility needs. And we found that some of our neighborhoods have 42% people with disabilities. And often those are where that same neighborhood that has 42, 89% identify as Latino. 60% of them are in the workforce age. There's a non-measurable amount of early intervention kiddos in that neighborhood. That's not the neighborhood we do early intervention pop-ups. That's where we talk about job readiness and we do it bilingually, right? And so that's also how we're informing our plan going forward, is starting in the areas of the highest need. And so that's something that we're working on. It's going to take time, but I do believe that for the first time in the city's history, we are making real progress to make our city not only go beyond compliance, that we're a welcoming and equitable city. So I do believe that in the future, we will be fully successful in doing so.
That is definitely wonderful to hear. And to wrap up this amazing employee panel, I want to talk about success stories. So within this last couple of minutes that we have, can each of you tell us about a success story that you have from your company? We'll start with you, Kate.
we opened our doors on March 21st, which was World Down Syndrome Awareness Day. And we have employed 15 individuals with disabilities at our shop, which is a huge success in my book. And my biggest success is the relationships that have formed within, I call it the squad, our team. And it's just so beautiful to see friendships forming, people of all abilities going out after work together, building the social life that a lot of the parents of my employees have talked to me about having been lacking for their child once school ended. And so my biggest success is the friendships and relationships that are forming and amongst our regulars as well. It's a really fun place to be.
Recently, Disability Rights Pennsylvania, I have several success stories, but I think one that stood out for me was a person who had applied for a job at actually the library in Philadelphia, the Free Public Library, was in the application process and found that one of the questions actually was asking her to disclose her disability, and which was like, really? And so we asked for the application, and in fact, it did ask very in a roundabout way what her disability was. So we were able to connect with the library and explain to them that this was a violation of her right, and this was discriminatory. And so they were able to change that application, and she was now not required to disclose her disability. And if she chose to, for accommodations or what have you, that was her right. But she understood that. So that was a win for us.
So I have one of my most favorite, and I have many, but this one stands out to me the most, and it's really home for me. But I was working with a young gentleman, because I've been with Penmar for 33 years. I worked with him through the vocational side of sheltered workshop, and I kind of knew him a little bit. So he was very geared to coming to our work center, working and doing piece rate type of work environment. Mom and dad were happy that he was there, felt that he was good and safe there. And then all of a sudden we changed our route and went into discontinuing that side of it and going now working, helping support with employment. Mom and dad are lovely people, love their son immensely. But we're very, very concerned and very scared for him. And I said, let's go through the discovery process. Let's see what he really, really has. There's more to this gentleman. I could feel it. Let me find it. And that's exactly what we did through what we call the exploration and discovery process. And this is the process that you learn through the ACRE program. And we uncovered he is very shadowed. He will shadow you. He will do anything you show him to do. Now, mind you, this is an individual who is autistic and nonverbal. And once I was able to identify all of his great skills, and then I found an opportunity in his community. We went and did a work assessment. This is how we help sell his abilities. Basically, I have to sell his abilities for an employment. The employer saw what he could do. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it ended up being a great partnership. Now, this individual is now completely independent in the community, does not need assistance getting into his work environment anymore, is able to punch in on his own, and be a very productive person, making a paycheck, and he loves it there. And we learned how we know he loves it there, right? We want to make sure he wants to be there. And we've learned what does that look like? And that's just through getting to really know who he is and learn from the people that love him the most. But I think the greatest overall, the reason why I love it so much is mom and dad, like I said, they're lovely people. And they said, good luck trying to figure this guy out, because they couldn't. All they wanted him to do is say, hi, mom, and hi, dad, because they just wanted to hear his voice. And he does not talk. And I was like, okay, I was challenged and I challenged it. And now he is, like I said, he's employed, and it makes me feel really good. Now, this is going to be apparent when God forbid it ever happens, that if he were to lose his job, they're going to be the first one on my doorstep saying, find him another job. And I will, but he's pretty set. He's got to pretty cool job. But that it just hits home for me that my job is well worth it. It helps support the people that we, the people that we support. And, we help them live their best life. So, yeah.
Yeah. Just to piggyback what Trish was saying, I mean, definitely has a lot more time and relationships, but we being relatively new. Every person we support is a success story as far as I'm concerned. They're getting out in their community. They're getting out of their homes. They're getting out of the day programs. They're learning that they can contribute to society. They're having an opportunity to earn a wage, that they can buy things that they like. I mean, everybody likes to buy things. I mean, some of our guys, they're like, oh, I'm going to Dick's or I'm going here. It's great that they have that money. They have that opportunity. They have that control over their life, because a lot of times they spend a lot of time in their lives being told where they could do or what they could do. They have this opportunity now to make the choice for themselves. If they don't like where they work, then we'll find them another job. That's a very important part. And to piggyback backtrack on what the employers, one of the big things I stress with my coordinators and my job coaches is that we're here to support the individuals, but we do need to support the employers as well. They need to be like, we need to train them to meet the people where they are. A lot of times they'll call in and say, so-and-so needs coaching. They need more coaching. And we'll go in and they're like, well, they're not working as fast as the other people do. Okay, well, they're working to the ability that they are, and we need you to meet them where they are. This was discussed, and this is what they were hired for, and we need you to work. So sometimes they really need to help the employer understand, because a lot of times when Trish customizes a job and stuff, she'll talk to HR, but it may not be the person that directly supervises them. And they have that person, and they're just like, they don't understand what their specific needs, how they communicate, what they require, how they learn. And it's a big part that I really try to get the coordinators to take that process and to educate the direct supervisor or a natural support. We try to find a natural support, so that way they have somebody they're comfortable talking to. So that's a big part. But yeah, as far as success stories, they're all success stories. Every person that's not sitting at home watching a TV, that is out in the world doing something that they're happy is a win as far as I'm concerned.
I shared some of our success stories already, but I think for me as a leader, I'm really rooted in propelling information equity. If people just have equitable access to information, their rights, like what's going on, so much can open up. And I love that I've really been given the go from the city to just challenge them, to call them in, to call them out. I had one colleague in a department that they had a deaf resident that wanted to attend their program, longstanding program, first time a deaf person had wanted to participate, and they were requesting ASL interpreting. And they were like, that's really expensive. And I was like, well, but they want to do it. This is great. This is wonderful. I'll help you. Well, we have the vendor, we have the contract, no problem. This is how you add it to your fiscal line. I'll help you through the whole thing. They're like, oh, is there any other thing that we can do? And I was like, yeah, so you can get the ASL interpreter and then you can have this person join the group. And they were just really resistant and hung up on the cost, like the cost, they just couldn't get past the cost of an interpreter. And I said, you know what, fine, you're right. There is something else you could do. They're like, well, thank you. Finally, thank you, Amy. And I go, let law know you need more money in your litigation budget. And they were like, what? And I was like, well, you're really concerned about costs. So you just might want to get with law to make sure that you have enough money in your litigation budget, which is a lot more than a ASL interpreter. And what was wonderful about the story, and why I showed the success, is last year they put an RFP for all of their vendors for the program to include ASL and other accommodations in the process from the get-go. So I will leave you with this thought. When it comes to accessibility, think about when we bake a cake. If you forgot the sugar, it looks like a cake. Doesn't taste like a cake. And it's a lot harder to sprinkle it back in once the cake's been baked. So the same goes for accommodations and accessibility and universal practices. If we do them from the beginning, there's a different outcome, right, than trying to sprinkle it in. So for me, that's the success, is that we've been able to really shift that dialogue around accessibility and disability inclusion and action. And I am so proud of, even for me, of where I am. I have been homeless, I have been unemployed, and I have been lost to addiction. And the fact that I can be out at work as a recovering drug addict of over 7 years in executive leadership is something that we have to shift. If you're addressing systemic problems, you need to employ the people that have that lived experience. And I love that the mayor and the administration have welcomed me and allowed me to be who I am. I don't hide it. The city did a whole blog post on it for Addiction Recovery Month. And I think that it's important because you never know who you're going to impact. I get stories all the time from employees that are considering going to rehab that wish that they had someone safe to talk about, that their brother or someone else is disabled that is also facing this. So I think the more that we can open up the dialogue and remove the stigma, that it's just part of the human experience, you're going to have a different outcome. So for me, that's the success story of Philadelphia, is that we are coming to the table, we're letting ourselves be called in, and we are reducing stigma in the process as well.
Well, on behalf of the PHRC, I want to thank you all for not only participating in this panel, but for all that you do for the community. Can we give our panelists a hand, please? Thank you all, much appreciated.
So there's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. in which he articulates that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The